Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Hi there, it's so wonderful to have you here with me today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited to introduce you to today's guest, Surabhi Venkatesh. You know how there are those special people that the minute you meet them, there's an instant rapport and you feel like you could just talk for hours? Well, that's exactly how it felt for me chatting with Surabhi, and I know that you're going to feel the same way too. Surabhi is a certified dog behavior and nutrition coach based in India, and she founded Luchi and Muttons after her own two rescue pups presented challenges that required her to look deeper, taking a whole dog and whole human approach. In this episode, we have a candid conversation about some of the challenges that we've both faced with our own dogs and all the particular complexities of being dog parents to, well, complex dogs. We also talk about how meeting our dogs with radical empathy in their healing journeys made us realize the need for approaching ourselves with that same level of empathy in our own healing journeys. If you have got a complex dog, and honestly, even if you don't, I know you'll find value in hearing about this. Surabhi shares her experience of studying with Sindhoor Pangal at BHARCS in Bangalore, where she learned about asking the why of our dogs' behaviors and how to hold space for our dogs and our own big feelings. Oh my goodness, there are just so many nuggets in this chat. Truthfully, too many to list. Surabhi is such a wonderful human, and her approach to dogs is inspiring. We do touch on some aspects of nutrition and different cultural approaches to feeding our dogs, but we're saving a deep dive into that for a future episode. So if there's something that you'd like us to address when it comes to canine nutrition and how to best support your dog's health through food, let me know and I'll make sure that we address it. Just DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. Now, before we get started, a quick note that this episode was sponsored by Aspirationary, which, in full transparency, is another project of mine where we create books, notebooks, and stationery to help you become all you aspire to be. You can check out our shadow work and moon magic journals and workbooks, as well as our popular My First Period tracker for young girls and tweens on Instagram at Aspirationary, and that's spelled Aspirationery. Okay, let's go. Hi, Surabhi. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. This is a conversation I've been counting the days until.
Hi, Alexa. It's lovely to be here. I am very excited about today as well.
I'm excited to see where this goes because we had a chat a couple of weeks ago and it was like, oh my God, we could talk for absolute ever. This is so much fun. So I'm really excited to see what comes up. But I did want to give the listeners a little bit of a context as to why I reached out to you. And in part, it was because Nikki French, who I interviewed on the podcast previously,
Right.
when she and I were talking sort of off air, she was like, oh my God, you two need to talk. There is just so much that you could be talking about. And I was familiar with your work, but the more I dove into it, I was like, yeah, we do need to talk. And then we had the intro kind of conversation.
Yeah.
I was like, another soul sister. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it was so funny today. I was recording an episode with Nikki for my podcast, and I happened to mention that I'm chatting with you later tonight. And she was just like, yes, two kindred souls just talking together. That's what we need.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And I just know that the audience is going to feel the same way too, that they're just going to love everything that you have to offer and gain so much from your perspectives, from your wisdom and experiences that I'm excited to share this with them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yay, yay. Well, I wondered if you could start off with talking a little bit about your journey into dog nutrition and
Yeah.
behavior and kind of what that has brought up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I adopted my first dog, Luchi, back in 2018. And up until then, I had never had dogs in my life and in my house. I think I was always very fond of them, and a lot of people around me had dogs, and so it was a lot about their dogs versus my dog. And so I think that when I adopted Luchi, I walked into um, dog guardianship, I would say, with very conventional and traditional ideas of what it meant to have a dog. And a lot of it had to do with nothing is free in life. You have to have rules. You have to have I think the whole rhetoric of you must control your dog and good behavior, bad behavior, that kind of stuff. So I walked into that relationship with a lot of that information and baggage. Um, and so I think a couple of things happened with Luchi. I think one is, um, I think for a very long time, I failed to understand where she was coming from, failed to understand her internal states. I very actively resisted what some of our interactions were bringing up for me, especially in terms of, just reflections, realizations. I think acknowledging really her full sentience. So I think there was a lot of that was happening. But, and again, I think I came in touch with that at a much later stage in my dog parenting journey. But I think in day to day, what I was really struggling with her on was, something as simple as just feeding her. We were advised to offer her kibble, which is what she was eating at the shelter. The vets, over here, for example, in India, there's a really big culture of pet shops advising you on what to offer your dogs as well. So everywhere, the information really was just kibble. Um, and and so when we started feeding her kibble, she very actively rejected it. And it sort of put me into a place of like, I don't know what to feed this dog. And so I said, screw it, I'm just going to start cooking for her. And, I Googled what you can feed dogs because I had no clue. And I discovered that you could basically feed them anything and everything that humans were eating, which was just such a huge revelation for me. Because I was like, wait, if they can eat everything, mostly everything that we eat, then why the hell am I feeding her kibble? And so I started cooking for her, and she started enjoying her meals. She showed interest in the food. We were struggling with a few health conditions at that time. Those slowly and steadily got resolved. And I think most importantly, I think I was able to share food as a love language with her, which facilitated connection. Again, something that I was struggling with and feeling really awkward about. Um, and so it's really interesting because I mean, I had therapy earlier this evening and we were just, different insights were coming up. And I think one of the questions that I really grappled with as a first time dog parent and as someone who had never, up until that point, really been responsible fully for another being, right, outside of my own self, was how do I just keep this dog alive? Right? Like, I think that's the big question. How do I make sure that she doesn't eat something horrid, that she doesn't injure herself, that, all of those things, right? Like, how do I just keep her alive? And I think that was an extremely scary, uncomfortable feeling, which also I think instilled like a great sense of responsibility. And I think that's really what I think a couple of these different experiences really pushed me down wanting to study dog nutrition and get a sense of, okay, now if I have to really keep her alive, then how do I do that? By just feeding her food that she needs to eat. And so somewhere around 2020 is when I signed up for a dog nutrition course. I sort of worked through that. And I think what's so cute of me now when I think back of it was I thought at the end of the course I was just going to know everything. I was going to master everything. I was going to be, this fabulous dog nutrition consultant. And then I started supporting dog parents, um, in a pro bono capacity. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, I have to, I have to work with what I know, but I also have to work with what the dog is telling me. And I think I think this was something that was really interesting, which is I think picking up the skill of taking feedback from other dogs other than your dog. I think that up until then, I felt really good about stuff because Luchi was giving me great feedback. But then I also had dogs who didn't give me great feedback, for whom things weren't working. And I think that was an interesting skill to pick up along the way. And so I think I felt very confident about the fact that, nutrition was my piece and I'm feeling good about this. And then I think just as life happens, when you're feeling good about something, the universe shakes you up and stirs things up for you. And so that happened when in 2020 we decided to adopt another dog. And so we adopted Mutton, who was a pit bull. And she came in with a host of issues. Like, I think that it was very evident, and both Luchi and Mutton were dogs from the shelter. But I think, with Luchi, it always felt like she she knew that she was a diva and a princess, and she was just waiting for people to wake up to that realization. uh, but I think with Mutton, I think her baggage was just a lot more visible. I think some of her trauma was a lot more visible. I think it showed up a lot in behaviors. It showed up a lot in her reactivity, in her touch sensitivity. And I think I found myself ill-equipped to support her. I think this was this was a very different kind of question. This was, I think, more like, how do we survive this, right? Uh, and so I said, and again, so much of the conventional advice around behavior, but also her breed, is very anchored in again, control, aversives, coercives, or I think moving to the other side of the spectrum, which is, dogs with high prey drive, they need X amount of exercise, they need X amount of support, and a lot of the things I just did not resonate with. I think for me, I very quickly recognized that here's a dog who seems to who is seeking connection, who's seeking safety, and none of this advice is helping me build that for her. And so that's when I stumbled upon BHARCS education, which is run by Sindhoor Pangal here in India. And she talks a lot about a relationship approach with dogs, where really the focus is, can you be open to learning from your dog? So your dog's your teacher. There is no other teaching there, right? And so if we're able to lean into their sentience, if we're able to lean into how dogs actually naturally live, and if we're able to take some of that and put it in the context of our pet dogs, there's just so much that we can learn. And once I started that learning journey, I mean, it was just absolutely brilliant because it changed things so much. Not just for my relationship with Mutton, but my relationship with Luchi. But I think most importantly, as I went on that journey of unpacking what it meant to really be a dog parent, I think it became an opportunity for me to open up to the idea of reparenting myself. Um, and so I think that was a very it was a journey that I think my dogs and I shared together. Um, and so yeah, long story short, I now do canine nutrition and canine behavior because because that was my journey.
Oh my God, so much. In fact, you've just brought tears to my eyes with the whole reparenting, because I think that's something that is often really overlooked, but that's such a gift of what having dogs in our lives, if we're open to it, brings up for us, because you're right. Like, I mean, all that you were saying, it's like, I think you're basically me. Like, we are the same person split in two different continents. Because I had those same
Oh.
experiences with Lucky, and that idea of like, what does it mean to be a dog parent? He was sprung upon me. I mean, I didn't go to a shelter and choose him. Like, it was literally, he showed up at my door. Can you take this dog? And I was like, what do I do, right? Like, where do I
Yep.
start?
Yep.
And all of those conventional approaches are coming from such a different perspective about what it means to have an interspecies relationship. And
Yeah.
so I think every dog parent goes through a version of what you just described of figuring out what their take on it is, what their perspective on it is, and sifting through all of the stuff that is online, which is in and of itself a full-time job,
Yeah.
trying to sort through, you
Yeah.
know, and coming to this place of like, am I actually equipped to deal with this, particularly when you have a dog that presents issues? I mean, I can relate to both the health issues and the behavior issues that you described with your dogs. And when you've got that kind of combo factor, it's like, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah.
And it brings up, I can speak from personal experience on this, that it brings up imposter syndrome. It brings up like every
Yeah.
single trauma that you have had in your life. It's like you have just exposed them and thrown salt on them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my
you
God.
know,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it can feel very lonely. It can feel like you are responsible for this. I mean, like I said, in basically every episode I've ever done, like they are mirrors for us for a reason. And finding the right kind of way of supporting involves finding your perspective, finding your lens of dealing with your dog and all that they're bringing up for you so that you can create that kind of relationship that you want that doesn't exist in the adverts that you see on TV, like of this is what having a dog is supposed to look like. I don't know a single person that has that kind of a relationship with their dog. And so breaking through these ideas of what having a relationship with a dog quote unquote should look like and
Yeah.
actually working with what your dog is presenting you and the gifts and the wisdom that are embedded in that is like for me at the core. And like you're saying, you flip that back, the gift is the healing that provides for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I love what you said because I think it's so funny because as you were talking, I was just like completing sentences. And when you said our dogs are our mirrors, I was like, yes, absolutely. And I think, I think you also have to let them be that, right? And I see the difference because I think that there have been so many moments in the first year when I had Luchi where she was really trying to show me what I was struggling with or what my triggers were, or what were things that I wasn't able to hold space with. But I didn't have the tolerance for that. I just couldn't do it. And so for me, it was much easier to shut that down and shut that version of also her down that could bring those things up for me. And it's so interesting because the year that we got Mutton home, that's the same year that I started therapy. And so Mutton came to me about 6 months into my journey with therapy as well. But I think because I started on that path of healing, I was also more perceptive, attuned, receptive to hold Mutton's vulnerabilities and difficult emotions. Like if I wasn't, I would have gone down a very different path. I would have gone down that path of this is unacceptable. We have to fix it. The whole power dynamic. Uh, and so I do think that the healing that we experience, our dogs experience, is very, very interconnected. Um, and and I think that if we were to and I think I've started really looking at, and I love what you also said about reframing how we look at our relationships with our dogs, right? Because I think that if we start looking at our relationships with our dogs pretty much like relationships with other human beings, we can make so much more sense of it. And so I think about something like marriage. I think about something like long-term partnership, where if the two individuals in that relationship aren't really committed to growing, aren't really committed to reflection, aren't committed to building self-awareness, that relationship does fall apart in different places, right? It's not the most authentic space or a space that offers fulfillment. in so many different ways. That growth and that commitment to becoming better versions of each other is part of building that long-term relationship. And I think that that's very, very true for even our dogs. Um, where I think both of us, the dog parent and the dog, are committed to showing up in the best ways possible. So yeah.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I love too that where you're talking about healing and the dogs facilitating that as well, that can look like you start a therapy journey, or for me
Yeah.
it was I went down a different path with my own spiritual journey, and
Right.
exactly when Lucky came in, and so I
Mm.
was much more receptive and
Yeah.
perceptive to what he was bringing up, instead of, I mean, I definitely was triggered. I was like, "Oh my God, I need to fix this." And I struggle. I have a personal struggle with the notion of fixing, and it's that idea of like, of course, there are certain behaviors that we need to, in a sense, stop. But it's not stopping that behavior, in my opinion. It's
Yeah.
understanding what is underlying it. Where
Yeah.
is that coming from? Because it's an expression, it's a communication. Like all behavior, I think, is ultimately a communication of like our internal state and our perception of the world around us. And I think it's the same for our dogs. And so when I was able to start looking at Lucky's reactivity, for example, through the lens of not so much like, oh, he's got a problem with people, I must have a problem with people.
Mm. Mm.
Not quite so literal as that, but actually looking at, he is dysregulated. He doesn't know how to make sense of his world. He is really anxious. Where am
Yeah.
I feeling that
Yeah.
in my life? And how can I use this relationship to actually support the both of us?
Yeah.
And start with helping him, and this is an ongoing journey, right? It's not like I've fixed the reactivity. He still shows reactive behaviors,
Yeah.
but I am much more cognizant of when he's not being reactive, for example, where he would have been.
Absolutely.
I'm much more cognizant of like, he's showing dysregulation when we're just hanging out in the house. What is going on?
Yeah.
Right. And maybe
Yeah.
today's not a great day to take him out on the walk, echoing back to Nikki's work with like
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
really present with like, what are these particular circumstances showing me about what my dog needs? And
Yeah.
consequently, because we're often the last to recognize our own needs, we often like will prioritize everyone else. And I think a lot of us who are sensitive, like we are, we also really prioritize our dogs. It's that whole culture bringing in the food thing of like, my dog eats better than I do. It's like, well, that's not a good thing. Like, you need to be eating well too, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so giving ourselves the opportunity to reflect back on and look at, what are my needs right now? Like, where do I need to focus on self-care? What types of things can I be doing to regulate my nervous system so
Yeah.
that I can fully be present with all that is showing up with this relationship with my dog? And consequently, we know that our energy states impact our dog's energy states and vice
Hmm.
versa. It's just a natural
Absolutely.
phenomenon. So that's part of
Yeah.
helping to quote unquote fix the things that we don't want to see in our dogs, is by fully taking care of
Yeah.
ourselves.
100% agree. Like, and I think it's important to also acknowledge that as we talk about healing, and especially because I was referring to therapy, and I think that shift that brought about, I can be healing, but I can also still be triggered. And me being on that healing journey doesn't necessarily mean that I am no longer triggered or I am fixed, right? And I think about, very specifically with Luchi, for example, her whining used to trigger me so much. Like I would get dysregulated within seconds, to the point where if she was whining, like I couldn't stand to be in the same room. Like I needed that to just stop. Like it was that bad. Um, and I think for the longest time I didn't understand why it was so dysregulating for me. And obviously it came out at her in very different ways, right? It would be, why are you whining? What do you need? And then it would just mean me breaking down in front of her, right? And it was just really, really messy. And I struggled with that for a really, really long time, like a really long time. I think it's only perhaps in the last year and a half that I was able to work through some of it, but it lasted for a really, really long time. And I think what I resonate with the even your example where you talked about Lucky was, I think, one, I think just accepting a few things. I think we spend so much time fighting what we're seeing in front of us and holding on to what we think we should see, which I think creates the problem to begin with, right? And so I think for me, a big part was accepting that Luchi is a whiner. And now, if I accept that she's a whiner, can I find something endearing about this, right? And it sounds really silly, but I think the minute I was able to accept it and literally say it out loud that she is a whiner, it just lifted so much stress out, right? And I think it allowed me moments of clarity to be like, am I in a position right now to handle this? Or do I need someone to step in and take over this because I can't handle it? Am I able to, in the moments when she is whining, am I able to hold on to the fact that, okay, she's not whining to piss me off. She's whining because she's a whiner and I need to just lean into what she needs. Or am I just too dysregulated to even hold that perspective for her? But I think that, yeah, I think it's just interesting. I feel like Lucci till the very end continued to show up that mirror that was very, very uncomfortable for me in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
Oh, they totally do. But let me say, you were just doing like spiritual black belt ninja work there. I think it's so true that is what we're called to do. And ironically, or not so ironically, because I don't believe in coincidences at all, I was having a conversation with a friend last week about this, and then another friend sent me an audio clip from Michael Singer, who was talking about a Taoist perspective on acceptance and surrender and what that actually means. And he was saying that, yeah, like the root of suffering does exactly like you're saying. It comes from that disconnect between what we feel like we're experiencing and what we feel like we should be experiencing. And so, how do we really accept what is happening in front of us and not view it from that typical lens that we do of judgment of like, this is good, this is bad, but actually, this just is. This just is. Is it possible for me to be in the moment with that? And I think it's through, and I have not mastered this. Like, I'm still working on this. So I'm not speaking from like Buddha perspective, right? Like, but I'm saying this is the work that I'm actively doing with Lucky and what he's presenting me. And instead of necessarily psychoanalyzing what I feel his reactivity is doing to me and going down the kind of psychological route, that is well and good. And is it possible for me to like not have any judgment, not have any kind of need to dissect it and just be like, this is just what this moment is?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that I think it's hard to find every answer going down that psychological route. And it's so interesting you said that, because I think that when I was struggling with the whining, I said, I really need to go like deep into my childhood, figure out why this is so triggering and how do I overcome it. And I didn't have an answer. I I really didn't. And I mean, sure, I could have like a bunch of different hypotheses, but those aren't really helping me, right? Because my reaction in that moment, what I'm feeling in my body is very real. And so, in that moment, to say that, oh, this is you're having this reaction because of what happened in your past and it's not working, right? And I think this is true for how and I think this is the nuance, which is how you would show up to take care of yourself is exactly how you would show up for your dogs. And so in this moment, when I'm so triggered that I'm unable to regulate, the only thing that works for me is to be removed from that situation. And that's also what we do for dogs who find it difficult to cope in the presence of certain triggers. Right? We build those skills of regulation, but it is hard to consistently stay regulated in all moments. And so the times that you can't be regulated and it's too much, move out of the situation and find that break to process. And so I think I started seeing a lot of these similarities in what it meant to take care of my dogs, but also what it meant to take care of myself in that moment. And even like for me, I think a big part of my own journey was learning how to set boundaries with family. And I think I learned how to do that because I was facilitating that for my dogs. Um, and so for me, I definitely remember that in that timeline, I think that was a big aha moment to say, oh, I can do the same thing without coming across, as rude or disrespectful, or dismissive. And I thought those were some really interesting overlaps for sure.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And like what a benefit that creates for your relationship with your family as well. That it's, I think often, and I do think that this is somewhat of a gendered thing too, in the way that most women are kind of raised to be people
Yeah,
pleasers, to like not
for
rock
sure.
the boat and stuff. And so we can often view, if we have not been raised in either a family of origin environment or a cultural environment that supports setting boundaries as a healthy thing, where it's often viewed as like, you're being aggressive or whatever, we can
Yeah,
feel very uncomfortable with doing that. But the
yeah,
reality is when we set boundaries, it's a really healthy way of teaching people how to engage with us, and for us to be taught in a healthy way how to engage with others. And that's what we're trying to do for our dogs, right?
absolutely, absolutely, 100%. And I mean, there's just so many things like that, right? Like I remember when Mutton came home and she started like, having these reactions and uh, really sort of communicating her internal states, I found myself quite envious of her because I was like, oh, wow, like, look at her. She's just uninhibitedly expressing discomfort. She's just uninhibitedly saying, this is not okay. I want space. And how incredible is it for her to be able to do that in a space and in relationships where that is respected and acknowledged and seen. And I think that, I've always, for the longest time, I've had a really big problem communicating rage. It's always been very suppressed for me. And but I think watching her do that was like, oh, maybe I could try it, and maybe I could see, do my relationships have holding capacity? And if they don't, then can I ask for that holding capacity? Because it seems like when my dog is asking for it, I am able to give it. So why can't people around me give it for me? But I think it's but again, right, like these are things that happen when you open up your mind to what your relationship with your dogs can be. If we're still stuck in that ownership, I'm just going to take care of you from a distant kind of perspective, just meet your basic needs, nothing really more, still be stuck in, okay, I've got a dog, feed them, walk them, bathe them, be done with it, then it's very hard to experience, I think, some of these really powerful moments with them.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you're talking about too reminds me of something that a really dear friend of mine talked about in terms of marriage. And so kind of linking back to what you were saying about learning about different relationships. And he was talking about his marriage with his husband. And he said, we had a conscious agreement that the marriage, the relationship is actually the third party in this
Mm.
situation. So you've got the two individuals and then you've got the relationship. And he said that we both actively work to support the relationship and what the relationship needs. And he said that that actually helps alleviate some of the kind of like the polarities that can exist between two people, right? Or like, you did this, I did this, that kind of a sort of situation. But that when the two of you in any relationship, so you and your dog is automatically doing this, right? It's just us that
Yeah.
need to work on this. That you become committed to that dynamic, and supporting everything that dynamic needs. And when you do that, for me anyways, as I've taken that perspective with Lucky, it has helped me to step back when I'm feeling triggered, and to also witness exactly like you were saying about learning from Lucci. When I have the issues with Lucky kind of expressing his emotions in a kind of rage-like way, right? Like he can be snappy. Some of this, he's a Chihuahua Terrier mix. They can tend towards this,
Yeah.
but it can feel like he just gets really angry really quickly, like he's spicy. I think there's a meme that I've seen go on like YouTube and stuff like things like that, like spicy nice. Like that's kind of how he is. He's like really spicy with like he's had enough and he lets you know.
Yeah.
And I've also witnessed so how I would take that personally and then feel like he's really upset with me that I've failed him, right? And when I started to then look at how do I look at this in terms of the relationship? So bring that third party in. How do I then start to better support the relationship instead of feeling like I've got to take this on personally? And at the same time, witnessing how, because dogs are so present, he doesn't hold a grudge, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I'm sitting there,
Absolutely.
I'm the one processing stuff and like, and I caught myself the other day when he snapped. And I was like, I felt like what I did to both him and myself was exactly what was done to me as a child. So going back to your reparenting stuff, which is part of why
Yeah.
it's hard for me. And it was like, I felt like I was giving him the cold shoulder for a period. Like, I can't believe you just did this to me. I can't believe how dare you do that kind of thing. I was like, and I caught myself in the midst of it of like, oh my God, that was what was done to me. And I was often given the cold shoulder or silent treatment, that kind of a thing. And it was such a wonderful gift, as hard as it was to go through in that moment. It was such a wonderful gift to both do that reparenting and to remind myself of like building that relationship. And he's not still angry with me. Like
Yeah.
his snapping was just, I had inadvertently come at him where I had kind of closed off his ability to get out of a space. And he was just saying, this is too much for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he then moved on from it. Like this was just a
Yeah.
communication and I've moved on. And I looked at how I turned it into this whole drama. But reminding myself of that third component of the relationship was actually something that was really useful for me to kind of depersonalize
Yeah.
and look at how do I just continue to build the relationship with him. And that extends the relationship, and giving it focus extends beyond any one circumstance or any one quality of the person, right? You start to be, you become, for me anyways, you become much more accepting of the whole individual rather than focusing
Bits
on the
and pieces.
things, bits and
Yeah.
pieces of it. Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, yeah, I think what you said was really interesting. You talked about some of the baggage that you were carrying, but then you also talked about what exactly was happening in that moment. And I think that is the dance between objectivity and subjectivity when we talk about challenging behaviors with our dogs or behaviors that are triggering for us. How much of it is really direct, like how much of it is really directed at us versus how much of it is just natural response by dogs, and how much of it is baggage that we're carrying from whatever we're carrying. Um, and I think just being aware of that. And again, I don't think the idea is to remove that subjectivity. I don't think the idea is to say, oh, I'm just going to view as behavior, every behavior objectively. I'm not going to take anything personally. I don't think you can ever do that in any relationship. You will carry that baggage, right? And there will be moments that you will feel hurt and feel rejected and all of that. But I think, how do you how do you how do you find some center through that, and I find that, at least in my case, i think I think the community that I surrounded myself with played a huge role in that, in just being able to center myself. I think the fact that I was part of and that I'm part of BHARCS, again, where all of us think very similarly, appreciate the intimacy and the interwovenness in our relationships with our dogs. I think the fact that I have a sister who herself is a therapist, understands these nuances, makes it safe for me to talk about them to begin with, right? Like if I'm talking about these intricacies with people who don't get it, it's just not a safe space. And I think that community then plays such a critical role, because when you go deep into your stuff, they can help pull you out. But also when you're too objective, they can also just I think create a space where you can give permission to feel a little bad about what happened,
Yeah.
right? And I think both are important, but
Yeah.
it is a little bit of a, balance, I guess. But yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, 1,000% to that. I agree. And because it also speaks to the fact that we have become divorced from community, especially in the West, where there's this idea of you as an individual are responsible for everything, you've got to do everything, etc. And that's just not true. Like it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a dog. I mean, you
yeah,
need
absolutely.
you need other people around you. So whatever that looks like, whether that's a physical community around you or an online space or whatever, I think that's one of the key takeaways is find a sense of community that supports you in realizing that you're not alone in this and that there are people who can help to be safe sounding boards and mirrors for you as you're working through whatever is coming up for you between you and your dog.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you mentioned BHARCS, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that and what that has entailed and what that has taught you in taking that more empathic and kind of whole relationship perspective to you and your dogs.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, BHARCS Education's it's a canine education school that's run by Sindhoor Pangal. She herself is a canine behavior consultant who studied with Tura Drugas. She's a canine myotherapist. She's an applied ethologist. Um, and her journey really started. I mean, she's written a fabulous book called Dog Nose, which does such a fabulous job of just capturing her journey. But I think, like a lot of us, she went through very similar moments where I think she started with a lot of the conventional, traditional advice around dog training. Uh, and then, her dog got into a really, really bad accident, was very life in depth for a very long time. She realized that her dog needed something very different. And so that put her on a different journey altogether. And so she's created this incredible community where she now offers courses. And so you can do a short-term course, you can do an advanced diploma to become a behavior consultant. And her approach, like I said, is very, very relationship focused. It is focused on understanding the why of behaviors. It's not focused on fixing, modifying, training behaviors. It's understanding that your dog could be engaging in a behavior for multiple root causes, and it's never one thing. And so if you really want to shift things for your dog, you have to see them holistically, you have to see them with empathy, you have to hold science to guide your thinking. And so I mean, all of hers, all the information on parks you can find on a website link that I'll share with you anyway. But I think for me, uh, I mean, Sindhu's just been fantastic for me personally. Like she's obviously been, my teacher through my education. She's been a mentor, but she's also just been someone who has created an incredible amount of like safe space, and safety in the sense of I can be thinking of the most convoluted things in my head and I can share them with her. And she, I think, consistently in all of my experience and engagement with her, she's always held me, and at least, and I can speak for other students, in just unconditional positive regard. And there's just something so, like, I think she just walks the talk, and I think that makes such a huge difference because there's just so much sincerity and authenticity to that, right? And I think that teaches you to also be really authentic. It teaches you to really go into those parts of yourself where you can show up like that as well. And I think for me, like I'll always be really grateful for the moment that I felt like I had found the right place. I remember very early on when we got Mutton home, I was giving her a bone to chew on, and I sort of moved her around a little bit and unintentionally moved the bone, and she snapped. And that was the start for me to realize that, oh shit, she has resource guarding issues as well. And I had never been snapped at ever. Like Luchi was, I could do anything and she would just let me get away with it. So there were, she really sucked at setting boundaries. But Maran was very clear about her boundaries. And she snapped and I was like, oh my God, shit, she snapped. And I went into a full like, I'm so sorry. Can you come back inside? Can we? And she just refused to come back inside. She was out on the terrace. She refused to come back inside the house. And I just started bawling. I was like, oh my God, I think I've ruined everything. I've broken trust. This dog is never going to trust me. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And I think what was so interesting was when I reached out to people that who were familiar with dogs, who'd experience of dogs. When I reached out to people who were familiar with the breed, they all told me, you know what, this is absolutely unacceptable. You have to correct this behavior. She should not get a bone till the time she doesn't learn to share. Why don't you smack her on the butt with a newspaper? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And none of them asked me, how are you feeling? None of them asked me, are you okay? Um, None of them asked me anything else. They just were throwing out this advice, right? And I think what I struggled with the most was in that moment communicating to them, y'all are not getting it. I think I have broken her trust. How do I rebuild that trust? That is what I want to know. The rest of this stuff we can figure. But how do I do this? And especially with a dog who I'm anyway struggling with, right? And she can sense that struggle and I can sense that struggle. So this is feeling much bigger, right? And I remember like I was scrolling on one of the BHARCS pages and Sindhoor was attending a conference and she paraphrased something from the conference and she said, she talked about you cannot meet scarcity with more scarcity. You have to meet scarcity with abundance. And for me, that was it. That was the moment. I was like, screw whatever I know about resource guarding. She is getting as many bones as she needs, right? And I think that for me, like that represented just a, a space and a voice that didn't exist. Where I think where I could talk about things like this. I could talk about, I'm feeling really shitty about what's happening between my dog and I. And I'm not going to be judged and I'm not going to be, be told, oh, you're being too soft. Oh, what the hell? Like, you're supposed to be like the alpha and the pack leader, and you're supposed to be, like, I just want to be heard and understood. And I think that's what BHARCS, long story short, that's what BHARCS facilitated and continues to facilitate. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. But we so need those spaces and we need those alternative perspectives. And I love that idea for so many reasons too, about
Yeah.
meeting scarcity with abundance. And I have the same issue with Lucky. He's a resource guarder. And even with I struggle with naming him because that sort of fixes him as like a resource guarder or reactive or whatever. Like he demonstrates these behaviors at times, even though he gets raw meaty bones all the
Yeah.
time. It's like
Yeah.
that's his prized possession. That's
Yeah.
like, you give that to him and he's like, this is gold. Like, this is absolute
Yeah.
gold. And one
Yeah.
of the things that I actually found helpful with a situation like that, it's almost less about the resource guarding and more about what you were talking with, like that fixing the trust, because I've had
Yeah.
those same feelings and fears with him too, like that I've broken the trust. But I actually find it works so much better when as a really simple example, when I feed him his raw meaty bones with me holding one end. And that stops the kind of guarding behavior, but he comes over to me and he like gives me kisses. He's so with me in those kinds of
Yeah.
moments. And it gives me an opportunity to keep showing him, I will keep giving you this. I
Yeah.
will not take this away from you. You know,
Yeah.
this is yours. And I'll even do things like, because he's smaller and he sometimes struggles with like the size of bones, like moving it.
Right.
Like I can see he's going for a particular side of it, and I shift it so it's easier for him. And he'll come over and he'll give me kisses again and then go back and eat the bone. And I feel like it's an opportunity in a very simple way, a simple gesture that both facilitates not having the kind of angry guarding situation, but also rebuilding that trust and showing him like, I am linked to providing
Yeah.
you with abundance. And that is actually what I want to provide you with,
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Absolutely.
abundance.
Absolutely. And again, right, I think I think we've spoken about this. Like, it's different for different dogs as well, right?
Yeah.
Every dog is so different, and how some of these behaviors present themselves are so different. But I think this is also another example where sometimes it's okay to not get into the psychology of things, right? It's okay to not like want to understand or go down that rabbit hole, because it's hard to do that, right? And like I think about something that again I keep reminding myself, and I tell this to a lot of the dog parents that I work with who come to me with dogs who have resource guarding issues. I am a full grown adult, but there are times that I don't want to share my food. I mean, it's true. It's as simple as that. There are times when I have got myself a really yummy dessert and it has been kept in the fridge because I want to have it at a later time. And I have given my husband strict instructions, don't you dare eat it. And I will have a full-fledged meltdown if that's touched. It just happens, right? Sure, you want to go into the history of I had issues with sharing. Did I have issues with sharing? I mean, okay, whatever. But like, there are just times when something feels important and you don't want to share. And I don't think that we have to think about it so much. I think we can just allow space for that to exist and just respect that. And so I feel like, I think that example helps a lot, because I think very similar to your reaction, I think it just makes sense for so many people. Um, but yeah.
I I agree so much with that, so much. And then you go through that feeling if you do share it with somebody, if you feel obligated to, and it's like, oh, I
Yeah,
really
you don't
wanted
want
that.
to
You
share it.
don't want to
Yeah,
share it.
absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Oh no, I love this because this also points to what I feel like a lot of the energy healing modalities actually bring
Mm.
up. And I'm also a proponent of, as you were talking about, looking at things from a holistic perspective. And so even
Right.
taking kind of like say an EFT perspective or a
Mhm.
Reiki perspective, adding in those different energy modalities in order to help soothe the dog and soothe yourself so they become more receptive to like training things, if you want to be look at it that way, or like
Yeah.
supporting their microbiome, all of that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think that most energy healing modalities actually are doing for us are taking us from the thinking mind, getting us
Yeah.
out of that perspective. We're very head-based beings to our
Mm.
detriment, totally
Mm.
to our detriment. It serves in some cases, in a lot of ways it doesn't. So taking us out of the head and getting us into the felt body and allowing whatever feeling is there to exist without
Yeah.
judgment, without trying to get rid of it, without shaming it, any of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, just to actually let it be. And
Yeah.
that is
Absolutely.
totally okay. And that's another thing that our dogs are really teaching us, because
Yeah.
they are just in their felt bodies. They are not,
Yeah.
we tend to approach them with training perspectives that are about their minds, like get them to think a different way about something. But in reality, they are energetically driven at the truest sense. Like they are heart-centered beings. They are
Yeah.
driven by emotions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
They're emotional beings. And so when you work with the underlying emotion of supporting that, of acknowledging that, of allowing
Mm.
that to be, and showing them other ways that they
Yeah.
can perhaps express that are safer, for example,
Yeah.
because there is that element of we're stewarding them, we are guiding them to be in a world that is predominantly dominated by humans.
Yeah.
But we have to also look at it's not doing it from the mind perspective. That what they are teaching us is that we need to get out of our minds and come into our
Yeah.
heart spaces and
Absolutely.
allow all of that to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, right, I think that's a great way to also look at how I think we're seeing the conversation on dog human relationships evolve as well. Because I think for the longest time, being in that headspace was what was rewarded, right?
Hmm.
Being in that headspace was what was acknowledged, celebrated, validated. I remember, Sindhoor's been around now for a while, and she was one of the first few people who started talking about emotions, not just in our dogs, but our emotions, our dogs' emotions, what that means together, what is that lived experience, what is depth in this relationship. And for the longest time, she was dismissed, right? And of course, I'm sure she'd speak to this, but I'm borrowing from her story. I think a lot of that dismissal also came because she's a brown woman talking about this from India, and so there is that undertone. Um, but I think that we're now holding space for the fact that there is a need to acknowledge emotions. There is a need to acknowledge that this is not a transactional relationship, that this is a deeper relationship that is built on respect, on understanding, on communication. Um, and so I think that evolution is interesting. Yeah.
It's very interesting. And I love that you brought up
Mm.
the whole issue about the lack of diversity in these
Yeah.
perspectives and the kind of misogyny and racism that
Yeah.
is at the
Yeah.
core of a lot of this, and colonial mentality, to be honest, as well,
Yeah. For
that
sure.
that exists within the world of dogs as much as it exists in our human world.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear some of your thoughts on that as somebody who does represent a kind of minority perspective that is not necessarily given the kind of voice
Yeah.
that other voices are given in this kind of dog world.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, I think it's been it's been a journey where I think we've, and I say we because it's been a couple of us who've experienced this in different ways. I
Hmm.
think we've pretty much accepted the fact that this exists. I think for a long time I resisted it. For a
Mm.
long time I said, oh no, but I'm working with people who love dogs. So obviously this is not going to happen. But I think we see those tones in different ways and formats. Um, at the same time, I think I've also been really fortunate to have a great number of people who've been really amazing allies and who've been, really incredible in seeing value in what I have to offer, in value in conversations like these. But I think it's definitely a really long, hard, difficult journey to put our voices out. One is, I think, to put our voices out there, right? But two is then to also build credibility around that, and to see the voice as a legit voice to begin with, right? I think so. I think that's part of the individual and professional struggle.
Mm.
But I think but I also experience the struggle in the way that I have to support clients, for example, right? And I see this 100% with dog nutrition. I think that we have such a colonized take on it, and it's just so unfortunate that there is just no space to talk about anything that's different from that mindset, right? um and I think I was thinking about, just very randomly, like I was thinking about a couple of conversations I was having with people in Goa, which is on the west coast of India. And Goa is great for seafood, right? Because you're right there. And I was talking to a couple of folks who were feeding streeties around. And I asked them, what do you feed your dogs? And they said they essentially feed them rice and they feed them seasonal fish. That's primarily their diet, right? Sometimes some dogs get a little bit of pork, sometimes some dogs get a little bit of beef, sometimes they're vegetables, whatever, but it's largely seafood. Um, and that makes sense, right? It makes sense because you're essentially feeding what's local to you, what's great, and what's great and where you are, what's grown really well, you're not feeding foods that are not local to you, right? And so the reason why I started thinking about that is because I think we were talking about this in our earlier chat, which is there is a cultural identity associated with food, right? And so when we say that dogs across the world are eating only one kind of diet, you are eliminating and dismissing the cultural identity of where they come from. And eliminating that cultural identity is also eliminating the cultural identity of people who live in different parts of the world. Because ultimately, if let's say 70 to 80% of the world's population of dogs is free living, it means that they are largely dependent on human scraps. They are largely dependent on food that we are throwing in as garbage, right? And essentially, what they are then eating is what we are eating. And so I feel like there are these things uh, that I think that just needs to be just so much more space for. And I really struggle with it in my practice, right? Because I think what I have been trained on, what my education has been, is very different. That is also a very colonized mindset, right? That is very different from what dogs in this particular country, in my particular city, in other cities that I work with, perhaps have access to. And so it is this constant tussle to say, how do I stay true to what I've learned, but how do I stay true to also what I am learning, which is not part of this, right? And I think going back to some of the things that you said, that's where a lot of the imposter syndrome kicks in. That's where a lot of the confidence starts taking a hit. That's where you also, I think, I personally really struggle to figure out what is that authentic voice then. How can I be true to this while keeping all parameters of health in place? And so I think that's that's definitely a big one. I see very similar things with dog behavior as well. I don't think it's nutrition specific at all. I think that I have I've had a lot of folks indirectly comment on the fact that I use this soft approach because I'm a woman, right? And I'm just like, sure, lovely, great, let's go with that. And so I think and again, right, I think it's so interesting that we say we're talking about dogs, but we're really not, right? All of these systems, all of our professions are run by human beings, and human beings are part of these systems and the intersectionality of these systems. And so I think some of these patterns and themes are bound to come up. Um, and so it's never just about the dogs. It's also about the humans that work for and in service of the dogs as
Oh my God, so much. I mean, they're mirrors at every level, right? They're mirroring their
well.
individual owners and they're mirroring us as a species as well.
Yeah.
I so relate to so much of what you're talking about because just on many levels. But I agree with you that because I went down the nutrition path for similar reasons in similar ways to you. And in fact, we even did one of the same courses. So having some of the kind of same basic kind of fundamentals that are governing the way that we think about
Yeah.
nutrition. And yet, having spent a lot of time in Mexico, where similar to India, right? Like there's a different culture around dogs. There's also different cultural availability. And I
Yeah.
felt like there was the narrative around nutrition is so focused on a Western mindset, and in particular, an American and a British
Yeah.
mindset. That's where the voices
Absolutely.
are coming from.
Yeah.
And what you have available in the US and the UK is very different from what you'll have available in a place like Mexico or India or
100%.
anywhere else, right? And
100%.
and there's also with that is a class conversation.
Yes. Yes.
Most of those nutrition things, and I fully admit that I am embedded in this conversation too, in that I certainly recommend feeding fresh foods over
Yeah.
kibble. Like I think from a
Yeah.
nutritional perspective of what is best for the dog,
Yeah.
fresh food is 100% better than kibble.
Yeah.
And I'm also cognizant of the fact that not
100%.
everybody can do that. And so the conversation has to be widened
Yeah.
around how we are approaching dogs. And also, what kind of pressure are we putting on the companies that are making these foods that are subpar for dogs? So that's kind of a different conversation, but it's
Yeah.
linked into it. But I also feel like you then bring in the other conversation around sustainability with this, where I see and hear the voices that are coming again from that primarily American and UK perspective and way of being. And it is promoting one particular kind of culture for the dogs and completely disregarding and appropriating in many respects as well cultures of dogs in other places and
Absolutely.
they're humans. And also from a sustainability perspective, which is a bugbear of mine, saying something like green-lipped mussels from New Zealand. I have
Yes.
recommended them for certain dogs. I absolutely
Yeah. Yeah.
have,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But to say green-lipped mussels from New Zealand are the only thing that's going to support joints, for
Oh,
example, is
yeah.
like, oh my God, what are we doing? Or like
Yeah.
one particular crop from one part of the world that's then
Yeah.
been sent all around the world.
Yeah.
That is not going to advance us either. And so,
Yeah.
to your point of how do we start to recognize the way in which things are grown locally and what are the ecosystems that are created as a result of supporting local eating for humans and for dogs. And to add on to that, I had a conversation with Kim Brophy, also from an applied ethology perspective, and we were talking about the ways in which dogs have evolved and will continue to evolve. And so we even talked about the food issue, that
Yeah.
part of the problem that we have with dogs right now is that we have bred them in such a way that what is a species appropriate food is the thing that they can tolerate. They can't really tolerate the kibble because it's not species appropriate. And so therefore it doesn't serve the body very well. However, if that's all dogs had available to them, eventually through evolution,
Yeah.
they would evolve so that that would become the species appropriate food, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
your point of free roaming dogs that have lived, who are
Yeah.
the majority of the dog population,
Yeah.
that have lived in communities where they are completely dependent upon those human communities and the way that those local human communities are feeding
Yeah.
them, who's to say that they are actually in a really healthy state as a result
Yeah.
of eating those local things because they have adapted to be able to eat that way, you
Absolutely.
know?
Absolutely. I mean, I think nutrition's a whole other topic.
I
But,
know.
but I feel like, yeah, I feel like I think the narrative is very selectively strewn and put together,
Yeah.
right? And so I think we're very confidently saying diet can have an epigenetic influence. And so you must feed your dogs a certain way, right? But we're discounting that same narrative when we want to look at free living dogs or when we want to look at dogs from other parts of the world, right? Or, for example, there's something that gets my goat a little bit, which is what I've also started now noticing in some communities is there is an interest in what I have to say because everybody assumes I'm going to be talking about Ayurveda. And I'm just like, I get it, but uh, no, that's not how it works, right? Of course, like, I mean, even like, and I can say this quite confidently, like a lot of us don't really know Ayurveda fully, right? It's a full-fledged science and study. And sure, a few Ayurvedic principles have trickled down into the way that we eat and consume meals on a day-to-day basis. But it's not like I am an Ayurveda expert just because I'm an Indian, right? And again, I think what's really interesting is, and I see this again with TCM, I see this with Ayurveda, which is from the culture, we're selecting parts that are convenient to that narrative, but we are excluding other parts. So, from let's say an Indian context, I definitely want Ayurveda because it fits the whole rhetoric of natural healing, etc. But I don't want to focus on, hey, what is going on with food patterns in this country with these dogs? right? And similar with TCM and so on and so forth. And so I feel like it's a very conveniently put together narrative, but it's not the full piece at all. Um, and so yeah, I think that's a big challenge.
Oh my God, yes, yes. And because I think it's a both and scenario, what I think is great about these other modalities coming into the mainstream is that if we start to understand them properly, they actually offer as a perspective that goes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning, too, of that whole
Yeah,
system approach of recognizing, like you're saying, like Ayurveda, like TCM, it's not,
yeah,
we in the West in particular use it in an allopathic way. Like your dog is showing this, well, it must be this, there must be some like
yeah.
kidney jing problem here. And so we're
Right.
gonna here, take this herb
Fix
and
this. Yeah,
yeah, you're fixed, you're
yeah,
great. Instead
yeah,
of looking at, no, there's a, it's a philosophy, right? It's a
yeah.
way of life. It's a way of understanding the way in which the world works and the interconnectedness of
Absolutely.
absolutely everything. And so the nice thing about it coming into the mainstream is that there's the potential for us, if we choose to be open and receptive to this, to actually use that as a gateway to start to look at all the other components in our
Yeah,
life and start to integrate those. My concern is just that in the West, we are focused on a fixing lens, an allopathic lens, because that's the way that our conventional medicine system
yeah,
works, right? It's not a
yeah.
healthcare system, it's a sick care system. And it's just
Right.
about treating symptoms. There's never,
Yeah,
well, there's very, very little discussion of the underlying issue that's
yeah.
going on that in many respects is an emotional or an energetic issue, right? That
Absolutely.
has
Yeah,
resulted as
yeah,
in a physical disconnect. But
yeah,
I agree, like this, it's so important to see where these things are coming from rather
yeah,
than cherry picking, excuse me, cherry picking what is suitable for the particular
yeah.
narrative that we're running at any one given time.
Absolutely. And again, right, I think, and we can zoom out of not just like cultural identities, but so many other things. For example, I think even in this whole, diet can help your dogs live like a really long life and all of that conversation. We're not talking about how broken even the food system is, right? So much of our food that we think is natural is laden with toxins and pesticides. And, I think very few of us are actually consuming organic, natural food, right? And so then what are we talking about? Because if dogs are consuming toxin laden food, then how are their systems expected to respond to that with longevity,
Yeah.
right? And so again, I think that these are important connections to be made, and I think just considerations, right? And I think for me, I don't deny the principles of any of them. I think my issue is in the way that they get marketed and the way that they get picked up as, like a singular piece of, like, almost like a magic bullet, right? Where we fail to consider other pieces.
Right.
Um, yeah,
No, I agree with you. I agree with you because I think the principles, like we know that as
yeah,
carnivores, they do better on a particular kind of diet. It's the both and situation.
yeah,
And there are
yeah,
complexities and there are problems with the food system.
absolutely.
And there are issues with like food deserts, like
Yeah,
accessibility where people can't even access fresh food. So how on earth are you going to
absolutely.
like access that for your dog? And these are all conversations to be having at the same time that you're also trying to do the best that you can for your
Yeah,
particular dog
yeah,
and
yeah,
what that looks like, as well as I love that you brought up longevity because this is another one of my bugbears that I'm not against longevity by any stretch of the matter, but I think that we focus so much on how do I keep my dog alive for as long as possible and often sacrifice the time that we have with them to do that. So we're so
yeah,
focused on the future that we fail to be really present with them and really grateful for the time that we have with them and the moments and the complexity. And there was something that Dr. Odette Suter said in the interview that I did with her on the microbiome. And she was talking about, I asked her to speak about something that she had mentioned actually in one of her newsletters, which was from her own experience with illness, as well as what she's seen in practice as a vet, and offered up this wisdom that, like, what if everything is okay? What if, like,
Mhm.
your dog being ill is
Yeah.
actually okay? You know, and we don't want to hear that because we don't want our dogs to be ill. But I think there's real wisdom in going back to what we've been saying throughout this whole chat. Like, how can we really be present to what's showing up for us,
Yeah.
including the fact that our dogs are not going to be here forever? And
Yeah.
maybe the point isn't trying to make them be here forever, but how do we like fully engage with them as best as we possibly can in every possible way in this moment? Because none of us is guaranteed tomorrow. None of
Yeah.
us. And I find I was from a personal thing, I noticed how this happened to me just yesterday. So this is very timely that we're having this conversation, where I was watching a little video that I took of Lucky on my phone yesterday. We were out and about, and we were just like sitting and enjoying one another. And I was rewatching the little video clip that I'd made of him. And I realized how not present I was in that moment that I
Mm.
made that clip.
Yeah.
I wasn't present with him. I was thinking about, I acknowledge, oh, he's so cute. I want to capture this. But I was also thinking about, oh my gosh, I've got all this stuff to do and oh this and all this. Da, 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 da. I was absolutely not present. And I caught myself feeling like this is what you are going to miss when he's gone.
Yeah.
This. This is what you are going to miss.
Yeah.
And so it was like a shock and a wake up of like, be as present as possible.
Yeah.
Yes, try to do the best that you can with sourcing
Yeah.
foods for him and learning more and all of that, but like go and play with him and
Yeah.
fully play with him without thinking about
Yeah.
what you've got to do on your to-do list and all of that, you know, instead of like it again, it's the both and with like obviously think about how do you support his health and well-being for as long as
Yeah.
possible, and how do you fully be with your dog right
Yeah.
here, right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, yeah, I think we're in sync completely today because um yeah, I think that we were like I was just in fact this evening when I was in therapy, I was talking about so it's just so happened that in the last 7 months I've lost both Luchi and Mutton quite back to back, right? And so Mutton was the first one to pass in October, and then Luchi passed away in March. Um, and I think I've been grappling a lot with the abruptness of their passing, right? Um, and I think that so much of the grief has also been accompanied with a lot of guilt, both as a dog parent, but also as a professional to say, oh, but could I have made sure that they lived longer, right? And I think when you were talking, I think for me, like, and I've been, I have my own way to process stuff. So I've been like extensively like researching on longevity and stuff like that. And, what is that really like? It's a way for me to just unpack and make sense. And I think what I've just been sort of connecting with is I think we have the food and the wellness rhetoric has placed expectations that our dogs are going to be disease resistant. And that is so problematic. And it is so scary because that is not true. That is just not true. Like, I don't think humans, I don't think any of us are disease resistant. I think you could be feeding your dogs the best possible diet and your dogs will still fall sick. Because not falling sick is also a problem. But I think that is really scary. This idea, and again, I think that yeah, I think that, and again, I think to what you were talking about with longevity as well. I think we ignore the impact of breeding. We ignore the impact, and it's so interesting. I was reading a paper the other day that talked about why cancer rates have gone up in dogs. And one of the papers talked about how because of selective breeding, where we're breeding more and more dogs who have lived a certain age, we're also reducing cancer fighting mechanisms in those dogs because they were not naturally designed to live for as long as a lot of our dogs are currently living. And so we're taking away that tipping point where they can fight cancer. Now we're rendering them essentially, incapable of fighting those mechanisms. And I think it's just so complex. And to simplify it and to reduce it, um, to just, here's a mushroom to feed your dog to prevent cancer. Like it just doesn't work like that.
No, no. And I think, yeah, to your point of like guilt and shame, I think it makes pet parents feel like they've failed their dogs. And that
Yeah.
I also feel like with all of the things that are put out on social media around like this vegetable will fight cancer and this mushroom and this and da, you should be feeding turmeric and all that kind of stuff. One, it's not taking into account how that individual dog in front of you is going to respond to any one of those things. And I've also seen firsthand pet parents that show me what they're feeding, and they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at the dog. Everything. Like they're taking, well, these people said these foods are great. And so they're giving all of them
Right.
at once. And I understand, I totally, totally understand the desire to do that. And I have done that myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
100% hands up, I have done that. But I
Yeah.
think, and it's not about pointing the finger at the individual pet parent. It's taking that step back and saying to the industry, like, this isn't helpful. Like, sure,
Yeah.
these things have the potential to help support dogs' health, but one, you don't give them all to the dog at the same time. Not every single one of these things is going to be good for every single
Yeah.
dog. And it's not a guarantee that your dog is not going to get sick and live until it's 100. I
Yeah.
mean, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
setting up like this, it's holding hope like a carrot and
Yeah.
not really, and like you're saying, is like the magic bullet. And that's not necessarily the reality. And it consequently robs us of what we have with
Absolutely.
our dogs right now.
Yeah. 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 And I think just to your point of being present, right? And like for me, like I don't miss the moments where I tried feeding my dogs blueberries. You know, for me, I miss the moments where we could share a slice of pizza together, right? Because there's a routine around it. And so I think to just also be able to hold that perspective that ultimately, yes, all of this is important, but are you is this overshadowing why you really have a dog and why you really share a life with your dog, right? Because I think that to me counts for more. But yeah.
100%. Oh my God, you and I could talk for days on end.
Yes.
I I love this so much. I am going to put a little proposal out there that you come back for another episode and we talk some more because this is just
I
like
love it. Yes, maybe we can deep dive into nutrition and longevity.
absolute. There are so many rabbit holes you and I can go down. This is going to be so much fun. So
I
I
think
love.
what'll make it even more fun is if we start that episode with a shot of tequila each. I think it's gold.
I knew you were a kindred spirit. Oh, my friend, if people want to learn more about you and potentially work with you and also listen
Yeah.
to your podcast, where can
Yeah.
they find out more about you?
Yeah, all of the information about me is available on my website, which is luchiandmuttons.com. And so I will share the details with you. You can add that in the episode description if that's relevant. And yeah, you can find everything there.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Because you definitely need to check out Surabhi's podcast because she has amazing conversations, amazing guests. It's just such a great resource. And I think more and more people should check it out and learn from you as well there. So that's a great free resource that you can check out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you a question as well that I ask all of my
Mhm.
guests, and that is, what if, what have, if you want to frame it from this perspective, Luchi and Muttons, or the dogs that you've worked with generally, what have they taught you about what it means to be human?
My God. Um, I think to be imperfect, but still be amazing. I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. I feel like that should be made into a t-shirt. Imperfect and
Right.
amazing.
Yeah.
I'd buy it.
Yeah, done. I'm making a copy for myself and you, and I'll ship it to you. Done.
Perfect. Perfect. It sounds good. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
my friend. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience as a kind of parting note that I maybe haven't asked you?
No, I think just enjoy your dogs and just enjoy everything that they bring to the table and their entire rainbow of colors, even the ones that you don't like. But I think, yeah, just enjoy your dog. Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Surabhi, thank you so, so much
Oh,
for your kindness, your generosity of spirit, your time, everything. This has just been such a gift for me personally, and I know that people are going to get so much out of it. So thank you so much.
of course. Thank you so much for having me. I had the best time ever. Thank
Oh,
you.
good. Well, like I said, I'm holding you to it. You're coming back.
Yes.
Take care.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Surabhi Venkatesh of Luchi and Muttons. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear about any takeaways that you had, so feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. It's always so much fun for me to hear from you and about what resonates with you. And don't forget, if you have any particular questions about feeding your dog that you'd like Surabhi and me to address in a future episode, just message me. To learn more about Surabhi and how you can work with her, visit her website, luchiandmuttons.com. I've left that link in the show notes. And don't forget to check out the Luchi and Muttons podcast wherever you listen. Surabhi is such a fantastic host, and she has some really helpful content that you'll enjoy. Finally, can I ask you for a quick favor? If you're enjoying this podcast, I would be so incredibly grateful if you would please take a moment to rate and review it wherever you listen to podcasts. This would mean so much to me as well as to the lovely algorithms that help other mystic dog mamas and papas who are looking for community to find us. And if you'd like me to do a future episode on a particular topic, or you'd like me to reach out to a potential guest, just let me know. You can reach me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. Okay, until next time.